Assalamu alaikum wa Ramadan Mubarak. We'd like to welcome everybody to our season finale of A Daily Dose, medicinal motivation provided by Muslims in sports, in partnership and presented by Crescent Sports Media and Mala National. As we know, Mala National has been a partner of ours, of Crescent Sports Media, throughout this particular process. And Mala National, their whole theme is share your journey. Share your story, elevate your journey. So they've been a wonderful partner of ours. For more information, you can always check them out on Facebook at Mala National. Their website is malanational.org. And then, as you know, Crescent Sports Media, we were established in 1992 by two individuals with really just raising the platform and promoting Muslim athletes. For more information, you can check out our website at crescentsportsmedia.org and then follow us on Facebook and or Instagram. But tonight, man, we have a very special guest, agent. I call him Agent Extraordinaire. He goes by the Super Agent, Chafie Fields. He's from Philadelphia, star athlete, played at Penn State. It really helped him, revitalize the program there under the story program of the late Joe Paterno. And then he also transitioned and played in the NFL for the Denver Broncos, the San Francisco 49ers, and other teams as well. And he has transitioned over into the sports agent business. So he has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we're going to hear his story today. So we'd like to welcome to the program Chafie Fields, the Executive Vice President at Wasser Media. He's the Executive Vice President of Team Sports.
Assalamu alaikum, good brother.
Wa alaikum assalam. It's a pleasure. I'm honored to be able to share the platform with you this evening. And so tell the audience a little bit about you, how you grew up in Philadelphia, sort of the background and what the environment was like growing up in Philadelphia.
Well, in Philadelphia, born and raised. We moved around a little bit, man. So I spent some time in North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, but ultimately settled uptown, which is Northwest Philadelphia. Grew up in a working class environment, working class family. It wasn't necessarily the best of environments in Philadelphia in the 80s and early 90s. And so, we seen a lot and experienced a lot. And although we didn't have a lot, of things of this world, so to speak, we had a lot of love at home, right? And so my mother's a huge family, 13 brothers and sisters. My father's a huge family, 9 brothers and sisters. So it's an army of us, you know what I mean? And although we didn't have a lot of things, we had a lot of love, man, and a lot of support from amongst our tribe, so to speak. And for me personally, sports was like everything. This is a little known fact, actually. So my middle name is Ali, after the great Muhammad Ali. May Allah bless him with a spacious grave and mercy and forgiveness for his time here on this earth. But boxing was my passion. That was my first love. But although growing up, I played football, basketball, I ran track competitively. But boxing was my passion. And my mother made me actually sign an agreement that I would not pursue boxing as my profession as a young man, because she seen how passionate I was about it, but she wanted to protect me from myself. And so probably basketball was probably my next best sport, actually. But football, just the aggression of it and everything about it, it was just a part of who I was. It was my nature. And so I decided I'm gonna pursue football.
Wonderful, man. That's beautiful, man. So what attracted you to Muhammad Ali? Was it more of what he was doing in the ring? Was it more of, just the all around, just the human essence of him? What was it that really kind of drew you to Muhammad Ali and drew you to boxing?
What he stood for was what drew me to the champ, is what I call him. He as great a boxer and a fighter that he was a much better man and humanitarian. And for me, growing up, if I'm being honest, when I was a young man, again, we didn't have much. But what I did, I was always a real confident young man. You know what I mean? I was always super athletic, and so people was always drawn to me. But a part of me always felt bad for kids like me that didn't have much, but they might not have been as athletic as I was, or as gifted as I was, or talented as I was. And so they didn't get the same, you know, favor that I may have received from the community and the people in the community. And so when everybody else didn't have anything, you know, kids was harsh, man. And so they would, you know, do things to these young men and young ladies that were really just unacceptable. And for me, being the guy that I was, I would fight for them. Right. And so Muhammad Ali speaking for everybody, not just for himself, and standing up for the people that didn't have a voice resonated with me because it was something that I felt like I always had to do from a young age. And so that's why I fell in love with the chant.
So man, that's beautiful, man, to be able to make that connection at such a young age. So, you know, your family dynamics, you know, how did that play a part in, because, you know, Philadelphia is rough, you know, Philadelphia is very, very tough. So how did your, you know, your army, your community, how did they help you stay on the straight and narrow and kind of keep you out of trouble?
Well, it's having a big family is a beautiful thing, but it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because when you have this huge family and we're coming from a poverty-stricken environment, in that time and in that day when the crack cocaine epidemic hit the city of Philadelphia, it hit hard. And so for a lot of guys, it was a way for them to provide and survive. But a part of that game is violence, right? And so when you have an uncle or a cousin involved, then you are subjected to a lot of things that they're involved with because you're their family. And so it was a lot of things that I seen and was around as a young kid that kids that age shouldn't see and shouldn't be around and shouldn't be involved with. But for me personally, it was part of my ultimate plan that God had for me, man. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I think it was the best thing that could ever happen to me because I was able to learn certain lessons from that environment that otherwise you just can't learn in a book or on TV. Certain principles that I was able to grasp and learn from their experiences and from the experiences that I personally went through on my journey, man. And so when you're able to apply that to education, right, and put them both together, it's the best of both worlds. And so I can see things through a different lens than most people can because they don't have the experiences that I have, right? But once the education comes into play, both spiritual and fundamental education through university, so to speak, it's a great combination, man. And it gives me a sense of well-roundedness that enables me to do things and go places that otherwise I wouldn't be able to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, you know, Philadelphia is a scene, you know, where a lot of people are introduced to different cultures. And one of the biggest cultures and biggest influences is Al-Islam. So you get different sects, you get different, you know, perspectives of Al-Islam. So how were you introduced to Al-Islam in Philadelphia?
I was introduced to the Nation of Islam when I was a baby via my uncle, John Muhammad. Shout out John Muhammad. My uncle who really ultimately introduced me to Islam as a baby, where he had learned the principles and the knowledge from following the nation, and he brought those same teachings and learnings to me. And not in a way that was, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. Hey, just read this book. Take a look at this. Let me know if it makes sense to you. And my uncle, granted, is only 8 years older than me. And so he was more like my biggest brother, you know what I mean, than an uncle. But so when he introduced it to me, I was drawn to it. And there was another gentleman who was like a father figure to me by the name of Abu Bakr in Philadelphia, who was very, very, very heavily involved in the community in Philadelphia, very well respected. And he also was a guy that was very influential in introducing me to Islam. My Uncle Troy, my Uncle Tim, all of those guys in a combination, that me just watching them and admiring them and how they carried themselves and what they stood for, it drew me to Al Islam.
Mm, mm. So, man, you grew up amongst a village, man, and that's just a beautiful thing. So, in your sports journey, how did that transition into your high school career? You being a standout football player. How did that, those same principles that you learned from that village, how did that transition and help you to be, a star football player in high school?
So the sports, for me personally, as a baby, my athletic abilities were a gift. God blessed me athletically and physically to be able to do things, that's just not normal. And as a young kid, I knew, and everybody else knew, we don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to do something with sports because he's just different. And whatever it was that I decided that I wanted to do, whether it was track, as a youth, I was, a national champion in track. As a youth, I was a national champion in basketball, as a youth. I never even got to play with the kids my age in football. I always played 2 and 3 years up and, still stood out amongst, my peers and my teammates and competitors. And so in boxing as well, I was a big kid. So everybody thought that I was older than I was, but I wasn't. And so they always made me fight up, right? And so for me, it was always a certain level of acceleration for my development in sports. But because I was just naturally gifted, it came easy. And so when I got to high school, I went to high school and went to training camp with the football team as an 8th grader.
Wow.
These guys had no idea, why are they letting this 8th grader come to camp? Usually it's just for juniors and seniors, just varsity. Why is this 8th grader coming with us? Then we put the pads on and they said, okay, we understand why this 8th grader is here. But for me, the biggest thing that I personally gained from youth sports and just sports in general, and these are things that you translate into everyday life and business as well, certain things that you learn in sports, that's respect, accountability, discipline, time management, and all of those things enabled me not to just stand out in sports, but also education was second to none for my mother. And so for me as a youth, my punishment was, okay, you're not playing football, you're not playing basketball, you're not running track, you're not going to this track meet, you're not going to the game, you can't go to the gym today and fight, whatever the case may be. That was my punishment. And so school and education was always foremost for me. And so as a youth, I was a National Honor Society kid through high school, Dean's List in college, graduated in 3 years in college, started the master's program, graduated from college cum laude, and graduated from my MBA program, summa cum laude. And so education was always primary, but the reality of it was what drove me to be great in the classroom was for me to have the ability to do what I ultimately wanted to do, and that was play sports. And so
Wonderful.
sports has always been a part of my life and a part of my being and my complete existence. And again, I tell people this, a lot of people don't understand. My professional career was cut short, right, due to injuries and things of that nature. However, I don't believe it was cut short. I believe that that was the divine plan for me. And his plan for me wasn't for me to be an athlete, but his plan for me was to be able to advise the athlete. And it's different, the advice coming from a guy who did it than coming from a guy who doesn't understand. And so for me, I always feel like it was part of my journey. He gave me the ability to do ultimately what I wanted to do, and then say, hey, now I need you to do what I want you to do. And I accept that.
Man, excellent, man, excellent. So talk to us about, your transition from high school, going to Penn State. What was your recruitment process like? What were some of the factors that made you decide that Penn State was the place for you?
Ironically, Penn State in my mind at that time was not for me, right? So at that time, I was a young guy, again, coming from the fast life of uptown Philadelphia. You know what I mean? I was a very brash, very, to a degree, hard kid. You know, again, because of my environment and because of my experiences, it molded me into who I was at that time. You know, I was definitely, without a doubt, a basically a kid that was a product of my environment.
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State at that time, to me, very militant, you know, super disciplined. Everybody's the same. I didn't feel like I was going to fit in a program like that. But at the end of the day, his plan is better than yours and mine. It came down to the University of Florida and the University of Michigan for me at that time. And I chose to go to the University of Michigan. Commit. My mother got sick. And there was no way that I was going to travel 8 hours away to go to school when my mother wasn't healthy. It just wasn't going to do it. Called Coach Paterno, asked him if the offer was still on the table. He said, yes, I accepted it. And the rest is history. But even with that being said, alhamdulillah, because of my athletic prowess and the fact that I was able to accept the scholarship because I was academically qualified, it gave me the ability to have options, right? And so I was able to call Coach Paterno, and he accepted me gladly, blindly. If you want to come here, we absolutely have a spot for you. So come on. My freshman year was a challenge, however, because it was an ultimate culture shock for me, right? Coming from, again, what most would call the hood in Philadelphia, going to State College, Pennsylvania. And again, I'm a Black man, I'm a Muslim, and I'm the only kid on a team from any city in the country. Imagine that. In a university that at that time was 5% minority. It was very difficult for me to adjust to that environment. But again, for me, I believe that it was the best thing that ever happened to me, man, because it's his plan.
Yeah, so man, you had some, I would say, man, some of the best games that I've ever seen for a person in your position, to be able to, and one that stands out for me was the Arizona game, you know, that everybody talks about. That was one of, you know, the biggest ones that I've seen you. But then, you know, you talk about Miami and all of those things. So that's what happened, you know, in the bright lights. You know, what was it about Penn State that helped you become a man, that helped you even develop and become, you know, a better human being?
So I'm gonna give you a couple experiences, man, and one actually has to do with Islam. My freshman year at Penn State was the year that we had the Million Man March. I go to Coach Paterno. Now this, at the end of the day, I'm fresh on campus. I'm a freshman, you know what I mean? It's my first year, my first semester. You know, they don't know me, you know, they don't know much about me. They know where I come from and you know, on my background, but they really don't know what they don't know. At that time, I had a chain that said Allahu Akbar on my chain that I would wear. They didn't understand it. You know what I mean? And so when I go to Coach Paterno and I ask him, I say, Coach, you know, the Million Man March is happening. And this is during the week, I mind you. This wasn't on a weekend. This happened during the week. So I got to miss practice to attend. And he says, well, what is it? Well, what's going on with this Million Man? What million? What are you talking about? You know what I mean? So I break it down to him. And he said, man, that's outstanding. I want you to go and be a part of that. That's meaningful to you and it's important to you. And so I'm going to excuse you and I'll let the coaches know that you won't be here because I want you to go to that. It's important that you do. And so for me, it was like, man, that's outstanding. Because when I went to him, I thought it was going to be pushback and no, you can't go. You got to stay. This is your commitment here. But he enabled me to miss practice. He excused me and enabled me. And for me, that meant a lot that he would do that for me. However, not all the other coaches, you know, were as accommodating. They didn't like it. I get back and I go from, as a freshman, I was third on the depth chart to last. Didn't understand why. I go, you know, to the coach and say, hey, man, you know, what's going on? I got the wrong color jersey today. Like, if they put the wrong jersey, said, nah, you need to speak to coach. Go speak to him. He said, you missed practice. I said, but I didn't miss, I was excused. Coach Paterno, excuse me. He said, well, I didn't excuse you, so this is what it is. Okay. I go to Coach Paterno and say, Coach, man, this is what's going on. Coach calls a meeting after practice, tells him, you can't punish him for doing what he did. And I won't call the coach's name out or put him out or anything like that. But this man said, well, if it was an Irish event or an Italian event, would you allow the Irish kids or the Italian kids to go? This is a Muslim event. He didn't have to go to this. And I said, hey, this wasn't a Muslim event. This was about Black people in America. This was an event for all people that look like me. And he said, yeah, well, if it was an event for all white people, would you allow? And that's what it went to. And so for me, this is a coach. He's an authority figure. I got to deal with this person every day. And now I see right now, I'm a young man, I'm 18 years old. And this man really just doesn't like me because of my skin tone and my choice of faith. And it made my transition that much, more difficult. But with Coach Paterno being the man that he was, he eased that transition and always made sure that he protected me and made sure that I was going to get whatever it was that I was supposed to get while I was there. You know what I mean? So may he rest in peace, and may Allah bless him with a spacious grave, because he enabled me to be a better version of me. And the one thing that he also did was everything there was not about football. It was about education with him. He didn't care less about the NFL. He would, every year on our spring game was during the draft so that the guys could not watch the draft. He would not allow NFL scouts and executives in the building but one time a year, and he would not allow them to communicate with us, which at this point, I don't think it was the best thing for us. But for him, it was about developing young men and making sure that we were getting the most out of our experience there as young men and growing into adulthood versus just playing football. We were more than just athletes. We weren't able to wear sweats to class. We had to go to every class and was checked. Study hall was mandatory for every athlete. And so education was big for him, and just human development was big for him. I'm gonna take it a step further. At dinner, you couldn't just sit, you couldn't have a table of all Black guys. You couldn't have a table of all white guys. The dinner table had to be diverse. You couldn't sit at the dinner table with the same teammates every day. Had to mix it up, right? In each dorm, you can only have 6 athletes in the dorm. That's it. You had to be intertwined with the total population because he wanted you to experience the college world and the college life and get a better education of the world, more so than just being here and being a job. And so I commend him for the way he handled his program. And those are things that people don't know about the man that he was and how he helped a lot of us become men. Because I know for a fact, I went there as a young man. I was a real juvenile delinquent when I got to State College, man.
Man, that's wonderful, man. But, looking back on your life, you realized that Allah was really guiding you in certain ways, and really he complimented, the aspirations that you had of becoming a man, and being around that environment and that program really, kind of expounded some Islamic principles, while you were there to really kind of help you develop, as your life would progress. So, you completed your college career at Penn State. And then, so talk about, your transition from college sports to college atmosphere into professional sports.
Before I do so, I'm gonna tell you another experience that was a difference maker for me. Being as though it's Ramadan now, my first Ramadan while I was in college was my sophomore year, and it was during the season. And so again, being in an environment where Islam was the super minority. You know, it wasn't even a masjid on campus or in town. And so for me, it was like, it was maybe 5 or 10 of us that I knew of on campus, you know, in the whole town. But I'm competing in Division I sports while I'm fasting. The coaches did not understand, right? My teammates did not understand. But at the end of that fast, they all had a different respect for me and our faith, because they said, this guy's coming to practice every day. He hasn't eaten or drinking. He's not drinking water during practice, and he's still not allowing us to give him any less of a load than what's required of anybody else. And they just, for the life of them, couldn't understand how it was even possible. You know, it's not healthy. You shouldn't do it. You can't do that. We're not going to let you practice. And I fought through it. For me, one of the biggest things that I learned from that experience is that when Allah has his arms around you and is going to protect you, and you're doing something that is your duty to do, and is not for him, it's for you, for your blessings, do it. You know, because I actually had a stretch there where I had my best practices, my best games, and everything like that while I was fasting. I didn't lose 1 pound. You know what I mean? I mean, it was the best experience that I can recall of a Ramadan. But also, what it did was it exposed everybody to Islam and our beautiful faith. And I think it was a time and a period in my life where my influence was felt, but it wasn't for me, it was for the sake of Allah.
Man, beautiful, man. Especially during this time, you know, with a lot of our young people being able to go back and listen to this, man, that's just beautiful to kind of give them the confidence to continue to do, you know, what Allah is asking us to do, not just listening to our parents. You know, that's beautiful, man. I appreciate you bringing that back up. Um, so yeah, so now, you know, transitioning from college and going into professional, as a professional athlete, talk about that experience, that transition, and how you were able to navigate through that particular process.
The process was, it wasn't a hard one. I guess coming from, at that time when I was in college, first of all, we had the #1 recruiting class in the country when I went to Penn State. 3 to 4 years that I played there, at some point in time during the season, we were the #1 team in the country. And so for me, I guess my transition wasn't one that was this big eye opening, this big eye popping thing, because I was prepared, right? And for me, playing outside, really, it wasn't a big difference going from, you know, high level Division I competition to the NFL, because the guys outside are who they are. The biggest difference in the transition from college to professional football, at least, is inside. You know, the offensive linemen, the bigger guys, the linebackers, those guys are much bigger, faster, stronger. But outside, yeah, it pretty much stays the same. You know, when you're competing against some of the best guys in the country every day, first of all, in practice, but then every week in games, is nothing that is going to surprise you. It wasn't that big of a difference or a transition for me. And at that time, because of my experience at Penn State, my maturity level was different. And I was prepared. I went to Penn State, like I said, in my personal opinion, a juvenile delinquent, and I walked out a man. And so the transition wasn't very difficult for me. The transition was more difficult for the people around me, right? Because as I'm growing, there's a lot of guys that are staying the same. There's a lot of family that are staying the same, but they have certain expectations, because when you made it, we all made it, you know? And so we expect you to still be the same guy, and it's impossible to do. And so the biggest, I guess you can say, hurdle or transition for me wasn't on the field, it was off.
So yeah, I know, man, myself coming from a big family, I know those type of transitions can really be a huge adjustment, like you mentioned, not just for you, but your family. So how did you deal with that dynamic of You know, you come from rough parts of Philadelphia, you transitioned as a star, everybody's watching you on TV. And so now your family has this certain expectation that, like you said, that everybody's going to come up, you know, off of, you know, your hard work and things of that nature. So how did you deal with those dynamics and those relationships? I'm sure it was pretty challenging.
It was a challenge. It was the biggest challenge, right? Right. And for most young men in that position, it remains to be a challenge because part of you wants to do whatever you can for your family and loved ones, right? It's nature. But at the same time, you must first build a foundation before you can help anybody else.
Mm.
One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of young athletes make is, I made it, I'm here, sign a contract. All right, mom, here's a house, dad, here's a car, everybody, you want to take care of everybody, but your foundation isn't set. And so, as you know, professional sports is, in my personal opinion, is not a profession, right? It's an opportunity for you to play a child's game that you love and be compensated handsomely for doing so. But it's not a profession because you're not going to be able to do this for 20 years, 30 years. You're not going to retire an old man from playing sports. It's just not going to happen. And so this is an opportunity for you to build a foundation, begin your nest egg, and start for the rest of your life on up and up. Not so much an opportunity for you to make a $1 billion right now and then spend $500 million and he's starting all over again, you know, when it's over. And so one of the biggest things is trying to make the people around you know and understand that, hey man, I didn't win the lottery. Right? I'm going to work every day, just like you. Right. And for a lot of guys, for me at that time, I didn't have a family or I didn't have anybody else to support. And so my family was my immediate family. And that's who, my mother in particular, I was going to make sure that she was going to be okay. But everybody else is like, when did it become my responsibility to take care of you? Right. And so it's a difficult balance to juggle. But for me personally, it just got to a point where I had to make a decision that I got to do what I got to do for me. And then I can do what I need to do for everybody else. It just is what it is. And if you look at, you know, the super wealthy, not just in our community, but in the world, most times they don't even start getting back to taking care of everybody else until they get to a certain point where they can do so and do so comfortably. And one of the biggest things, one of the things that I teach and I preach is that we can do so much more collectively than we can individually, right? And so when we have a whole family, a whole community pulling just from this one individual, it drains that individual and it never helps the community as a whole, right? And so instead of draining them, feed them. Let's push them. Let's help them get better and do more and get with more people that can ultimately help the community. And so for me, again, my personal experience as a player on the other side helps me tremendously on this side as an agent and an advisor and confidant for a lot of these young men, because these experiences are experiences that I lived through. And so when I'm speaking to you, I'm not speaking to you about something that somebody told me or I think. I'm giving you firsthand knowledge of my personal experiences that I personally went through. And so it's different when they're taking it from me versus taking it from somebody else.
Now, you know, as you mentioned, your professional career was short-lived, but as we know, that was by the design, by the ultimate planner, Allah. So when did you know that being a sports agent? Now, I know I was looking at one of the interviews, you talked about your experience being around some of your friends like Rasheed Wallace and being around some of those people, you saw sports pretty differently. So talk about, excuse me, talk about when you made the decision to get into the sports business aspect of it.
So for me, coming from, again, where I was coming from, I didn't have a lot of, so to speak, positive role models. We didn't have a lot of professionals from our community. And some of the guys that I looked up to, actually everybody that I looked to outside of business were athletes. Guys like Aaron McKee, Rasheed Wallace, Marvin Harrison, and guys like that that left our community and went on to do great things in sports. The other guys that I look to in our community weren't guys that you want your kids to look up to, right? And so sports was the option that I decided that I was going to take, and this was going to enable me to do whatever it is that I wanted to do in life. And so being a sports agent was never an endeavor that I personally had. Being a sports agent was divine. Again, the way I became a sports agent wasn't the natural course of action for anybody that works in the field that I work in. I had a young man by the name of Brian Johnson, who still to this day is like a brother to me. I was his host at Penn State when he came on his visit. And we always stayed in touch. We always stayed in contact. Even when I left and moved on, he would always call me and bounce ideas off me and get my advice on different topics and different things that he was going through personally. When it was time for him to go through the agent process, he came to me. He said, listen, I need your help. I'm going through this agent process. Okay, how can I help you? Man, all of these guys, they talk too fast. I don't trust them. Can you help me? I said, okay, how can I help you? He said, well, can you introduce me to some guys and interview these guys with me? As it's just my mother and my brother, and they don't understand this stuff. Okay, of course, sure. I introduced him to a couple guys. I said, man, listen, all these guys, they talk too fast too. I don't trust them. Why don't you just be my agent? I said, well, B, I'm not an agent, man. It's not that simple. I can just be your agent, man. And he says, well, which one of these guys do you trust the most? I tell him, I say, man, JS, I trust him the most. And he says, well, can you work with him for me? Because I don't want to deal with him, but you deal with him and you just, you know, be the intercessor between me and him and let me know because I trust you and I know that you're going to do what's right for me. And I said, well, let me talk to him about it. Talk to him about it. And he coincidentally had been trying to get me to look into it, being an agent at that time. And just was an endeavor of mine. I had no interest. At this time in Philadelphia, I had two halal restaurants at this time, Garden of Bilal, Philadelphia, for those of you that remember. And so I was doing well. I had a barbershop, you know, I had an insurance. I was doing great, you know, so it wasn't a situation where I needed to do this. But it was divine. So I go to him, he said, yes, absolutely, you should do it. Speak to my trusted advisor and my mom. She said, baby, sports is who you are. It's been a part of everything that you've done your whole life. I think you should absolutely do this. And I think you should, you know, look into it, take it a little more serious because I think it's something that you can be successful at. They agreed that that's what we're going to do. His roommate at the time was a guy named Anthony Adams, who said, he called me, he said, hey, BJ told me what you were doing for him. Can you do the same thing for me? Absolutely. Well, those guys went in the first round and second round respectfully. And the next year, two more guys called me, hey, I heard what you did for these guys. Can you do the same thing for me? And at that point, I had to just stop and accept what it was that he was trying to bless me with. And so I did. I pursued it, went and got licensed and did it the right way. And, you know, 19 years later and $4 billion in contracts later, here we are.
Man, outstanding. Now you talk about, you know, you say that, you know, being a sports agent is not about, you know, just getting a contract and then getting out of Dodge. You say it's personal for you because you're actually helping these young men take advantage of the opportunities they have. Elaborate on that.
Well, the majority of people in my position, in a fiduciary position for these young men, sadly, could care less about these young men. And I always say it this way. For the majority of them, if you didn't play sports, they wouldn't even speak to you, man. They don't have any conversation for you. It has nothing to do with who you are as a young man. It has nothing to do with trying to help you as a young man, as a human being, as a person. It's more a business venture for them. And that's all it is. For me, however, I look at these young men as if they were my sons at this point. my brothers, my brothers, my cousins, or somebody else's kid. But at the end of the day, they're a part of my community as a whole. At the end of the day, I don't care if you're from LA to New York. If you're from our community, you're from our community. And it's our job to protect, to educate, and to give these guys the abilities and information to help them be successful in life, not in sports. This sports thing is short-lived, man. Right. And so, the average career for a professional athlete is 4 years across all sports. And so if you think you're just going to play sports for the rest of your life and then just sell off into the glory, it's not reality. It's just not going to happen. The majority of the guys don't play past 4 years. And so you know what that means? You can't live off the earnings that you made in 4 years for the rest of your life. And so we have to figure out what's next now. And the only way that we do that is if we have conversations like this about doing that, right? Because nobody's talking to them about that in their circle. Everybody in their circle is talking, oh, you made it, you the man, great job. Oh, this just the beginning of life for you, man. You guys are coming into professional sports at 20 years old, 21 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't even know what you don't know yet. And so it's very important for me in my position as an advisor, as a fiduciary, to guide these young men and a lot of times protect them from themselves. And teach them about life and the world and how the world sees us and why it's important that you take advantage of this opportunity with your platform to develop relationships and develop a community and a network of men so that you can be better off when you walk away from this game. And again, teach them that collectively we have so much more influence and so much more power than we do as individuals. Somewhere along the way, this message has been missed in our community because it's like, okay, I made it, I'm gone, I'm getting out of the community, I'm gonna do my thing, and that's just it. But what about everybody else? And this brings me back to Muhammad Ali. You can go all the way back into the Bible and into every prophet. Every one of them went where? They went to the communities where the people needed them. They didn't just get the message and run off and hide by themselves. They brought it back to the masses. And so for me, in essence, that's ultimately what I'm doing. I'm giving the information, the knowledge, the understanding that I've learned in my time here on this thing, and I'm giving it to these young men. And hopefully they'll do the same for the next young man that's coming after them. But more importantly, they'll get with our community and collectively try to do better and be better for each other, man. That's what's more important for me.
Mm. It's a lot to digest, what you're talking about, because, you're really talking about some things that are really, life gems, that these young men actually need. But I want to ask you a couple of questions, one on the financial aspect of it, because we know that the careers of young athletes, as you mentioned, is very, very short. And then the other thing is about health, because football, is a very brutal sport. So what do you think is the key to longevity in the NFL, with it being so such a brutal sport, so to speak?
It's a very brutal sport. It's a vicious sport. And again, for me, I guess you could say it was less brutal an option for me, being as though boxing was my first option, But that being said, your body is literally your business in professional sports because you can only go as far as you allow your body to take you. And if you're not taking care of your body, you can't do this. And it just is what it is. And so I try to explain to these young men a lot of times, they don't understand that they have to invest into themselves. When you see it from the outside looking in, you see them, they drive nice cars, they live in big houses and this and that, but that's not what it's about. Because without your body, you can't get these earthly possessions. And so you have to take care of your body. You have to invest into your body, whether that's from dietitian restrictions, whether that's from massage and chiropractic weekly, and ultimately just training and doing what you need to do to be able to withstand that beating that you're going to inevitably have to take, being as though this is the game that you chose. but you have to make a heavy investment into yourself, into your body, into your health and well-being in order to play any professional sports.
Mm. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the financial implications. As we know, well, the ones that do follow football, we know that the contracts are not guaranteed, and we know that the career of a professional athlete is between 3 and 4 years. What do you do to kind of prepare them for this life? It could be very short-lived, as you mentioned. You're still a young man, even if you do retire. After football, if you play 10, if you so fortunate to play 10 years. So, how do you prepare them? What is the conversation like when it comes to the finances? Because as you mentioned, it's like sometimes winning the lottery.
It is for all of these young men, it's a financial windfall. And if you don't take care of it, that's exactly what it'll be. It'll be a windfall. And before you know it, it's gone. Just as quick as it came, is as fast as it'll depart. And so for me personally, again, I try to steer these young men towards understanding and knowing from day one. I've initial conversations, I'm talking about what it is that you want to do after football,
Mm-hmm.
or after basketball, or after whatever it is that you're doing, because you can't do it forever. The reality of it is, and as a young man, knowing when I was coming through, I didn't think that my career was ever going to end. I thought that I was unstoppable and there was nothing that nobody could do to stop me from getting to where I wanted to get and playing for 20 years. That's how I felt. But it's just not reality. And so the reality of it is, chances are you're not going to play 5 years. So with that being said, you'll not ever make it to your second contract,
Mm-hmm.
which means that chances are you won't be able to live for the rest of your life off your earnings from this game. And so from the beginning, we have to start talking about and thinking about what your end goal is. Because if the professional sports is your end goal, you're in trouble. It's a fact. It's a fact. It's proven. The numbers are what they are. And so we have to start preparing for whatever it is that we ultimately want to do with our lives now. You don't have to start doing it, but you have to start thinking about it. You have to start preparing for it. The biggest mistake that a young athlete can make is go into professional sports, never think about what's next. And then when they're done, try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you see all the stories about these young men, losing everything, is because when you stop playing, your bills are still there. Your responsibilities are still there, but it's not a check coming in. Everything is going out. And by the time you figure out what you want to do, you got to change your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're starting all over again in a new career, new endeavor, and you're the rookie now. So you got to learn before you can get to a certain level. You got to learn. You got to start from the bottom all over again. And so you don't want to do that without having any means to take care of yourself, support yourself and your family. You just can't do it. So you got to start thinking about it now, man. And so for me, that's one of the biggest things that I harp on.
So one last question before we get into our Q&A from the audience. And this is, advice that you can give to other people that aspire to work around professional athletes. How do you gain the confidence and how do you gain the comfortability of being able to tell these young men and these young ladies what they don't want to hear? Because I think, that's very, very important. Aspect of being an advisor or confidant in these players is being comfortable and confident and telling them what they don't want to hear.
I guess for me personally, again, I didn't get into this space with any endeavors to be, the super agent. It's not what I wanted to do, right? And so I came into it with the right intent. I came into it with a pure heart, and I came into it to ultimately really help these young men. And I think when you're honest and trustworthy and you do what you say you're going to do, the word gets out, and then ultimately it is what it is. And so for me, it's never been a situation where I've been desperate to work with the guy. I'm going to work with the guys that I'm supposed to work with. And, that's just is what it is. And so I've never been in a situation where I have to sacrifice who I am as a man or do anything that's out of character for me. Everything that I do has always been the same way that I would want somebody to do my son. And so being honest, being trustworthy, and simply doing what you say you're going to do that word travels because there's not a lot of that out here. You know, you're going to get the exact opposite from the majority, from the masses. And so for me, I personally believe that one of the reasons that I've been able to have success in this space is because I'm a novelty in this space. There's not a lot of people quite like me in this space. There's not a lot of people that's not willing to, you know, kind of push the limits and do things that everybody else is willing to do. And so I think people respect that and appreciate it. And specifically parents, you know, when you got to hand your son off and give him just to a stranger, you want to know that this person has certain morals and certain characteristics that you have and that you represent in kind with this person.
So another question, since you talked about you being a novelty in this space, but before I go to that, audience members, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. If you have questions for Chafie, go ahead and post them there, and then we'll get those questions directly over to him. So the question that I wanted to ask was, you know, with you being a novelty in this space, you know, what is it like to have those conversations with team executives, you know, that don't look like you, they don't come from the same background that you do. You know, talk about that dynamic of dealing with these billionaire owners and team executives and what that's like.
For me, right, I guess over the years, I've developed relationships and rapport with the majority of these, you know, owners and general managers throughout the league. And I've developed a reputation of a guy that's going to be honest, a guy that's going to be a straight shooter, a guy that's not going to, you know, beat around the bush or try to trick you or cheat you. And so they respect it. And so, you know, at a certain point, they deal with you a little different than they will with everybody else. First of all, because they know they're going to have to see me year in and year out. You know, I'm going to have some of the best players in the league. It is what it is. And so they have to deal with me. And so that alone forces them to interact with me and to do so in a certain way, right? But my experiences on the other side of this as a young man, somebody once asked me, man, you know, you have a pressure-filled job and there's so much stress. And I said, whoa, my job is fun. My job is easy. There's no pressure. There's no pressure for me. How do you figure that? You know, how can you be so calm all the time? You're so cool. The way I grew up, I lost 27 people. I went to 27 funerals before I went to my first wedding, right? That's pressure, okay? Playing football and negotiating contracts and things of that nature. This is fun stuff. It's interesting to me, but it's no pressure, right? It's people out here living every day, real life circumstances and real life situations that go through real pressure every time they walk out their front door. Me being in a situation that I'm in today, currently coming from where I'm coming from, I'm extremely blessed and extremely thankful for the blessings that I received. And it's my responsibility dually to push those blessings off on everybody else that I encounter. And so for me, it's no pressure. It's a responsibility and a blessing to be where I am.
Wonderful, wonderful. So talk about the different dynamics of working with, you know, maybe an undrafted free agent versus working with a top tier guy.
No different from me, because I don't see you as a first round pick or undrafted free agent. I see you as my brother.
That's right.
And so to me, it literally is no different. And it's important to me that every individual that I work with feel like they're the only individual that I work with, that they're always going to be a priority, that it's not going to be a situation where I'm going to give precedence to this person or that person, or everybody is the same. You know, just like when you go to the masjid, there is no hierarchy. This guy's more important than this guy. No, everybody is the same. I represent all of you guys exactly the same. There is no hierarchy. And I'm going to treat you as if I wanted someone to treat my son or myself. And so for me personally, it really is no difference.
Man, wonderful. So last question, you know, what are some of the keys to your success, or what type of advice would you give to the younger generation, whether they're professional athletes or whether they want to go into the business side of things?
irrelevant of what it is that you want to do, you know, be true to yourself, be respectful, be a stand-up person, an honest and trustworthy person. Respect yourself at all times and people will respect you. And at the end of the day, whatever it is that you ultimately want to do, commit to it. Period. You can't take no shortcuts to success, man. And whatever it is that you want to do, it's millions of other people that want to do it too. And so the only thing that's going to separate you from them is your commitment and what you're willing to do to get to whatever it is you're willing to get to, that you want to get to ultimately. Because if you're not willing to make any sacrifices and you're not willing to do what somebody else isn't willing to do, they're always going to beat you, man. I'm going to tell you something. I personally was never, I was always a gifted athlete, but it was always somebody else that he put in front of me that I had to shoot for, right? And so it was always a target for me to aim at. And there was nothing going to stop me from hitting that target, because whatever it is you want to do, you should want to be the best at it. And if you're not motivated to want to be the best at whatever it is that you do something else.
Man, great advice, man. I can't thank you enough, man, to be able to come on the platform with us, man, and share your story and share your experiences. I can't think of a better person to really kind of put a bow to our final episode in this particular series. But we have to do it again, man. There's so much more that I've learned just having this conversation with you. And I know there's much more that we can talk about, you know, from the business aspect. And maybe we have to just dedicate, you know, a conversation just to the business aspect, you know, of sports, you know, talking about the endorsements, the growth of and the evolution of an athlete. But man, I'm humbled and I'm grateful and I'm appreciative that you were able to spend some time with us, you know, during the month of Ramadan. In the last few moments, we want to give an opportunity for our collaborative partner, Mala, and we're going to bring Ahmed Flex, Omar to the platform, and he's going to just share a little bit about the experience and the partnership that we had with Crescent Sports Media before we go ahead and close out. So Flex, I believe your microphone is free, so you have the floor to be able to share with the audience.
Thank you, Brother Hanif, and thank you, Brother Chafie, for sharing your incredible story. It's very inspirational, and like Brother Hanif said, we'll definitely have you back because there's a lot of more information to talk about: financial literacy, you know, the healthcare side of things, the mentorship. You know, there's so many things, you know, to talk about. Since this is our last interview for this season, I would like to thank you, Hanif and Crescent Sports Media, for being a phenomenal partner on this series. Mala is a storytelling platform, and we've been blessed to share inspiring stories over the years from members of our community to show that Muslims in America are not a monolith. Muslims in sports are often overlooked by the media. However, the impact of these athletes is felt in our community, and Mala is honored to amplify their stories. In these final days of Ramadan, I would like to wish all of you and your families Ramadan Kareem, and may Allah accept all our du'as. Please keep the less fortunate in your hearts and minds, and consider making a donation on our website for our COVID-19 response. Our website is malanational.org, which is MALA national.org. May Allah bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum, and Eid Mubarak as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the audience, and we will see you all soon. We have another series of interviews coming forward, so stay tuned and just check all of our social media platforms. And you can follow Chafie at the Super Agent on Instagram. He's also on Twitter. So if you want to pick his brain and send him any questions that you have, I'm sure he's gracious enough to be able to get back with you. So again, my brother, we have to do this again. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and may Allah continue to bless you with much success in all your endeavors.
Inshallah, you will have me on again very soon, brother. Anytime I can help any of you guys, Omar, or you, my brother, let me know. I'm here for you. As I said, it's very important that we do this together. It's a community. It's a collective effort amongst us all to do what's right and be here as a support staff for each other, man. It's very important to me, and I'm very serious about it. So whatever I can do, you let me know.
Okay. Thank you so much. Ramadan Mubarak and an early Eid Mubarak to everybody. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.